Thank you all for being here. There are several moments during my talk where I will answer questions, and although I don't have all the answers, I have high hopes that our collective wisdom will be sufficient, and I invite all of you to participate in the chat. Also, everything that I cover is included in the slide deck, including links to everything, and this will be made available to you. I've tried to interweave some personal experience with the material that I'm going to share. A couple of years ago, after 4 years as a business consultant in the semiconductor industry, which one could see as one of the heart chambers of the global economy, I had a burnout. Clearly my life wasn't very sustainable. During the sabbatical that followed, I started studying alternative economics, including donut economics, sacred economics, purpose economics, you name it. And I also had a desire to travel and learn things with my hands, as opposed to sitting in an office. This led to me giving volunteering a go, and I ended up volunteering at 25 places in France and Spain. And I continued studying economics on the side, and eventually this desire to contribute to the new economy grew and grew. And I also bumped into the idea of regeneration. Now, before I continue, I would like to know what comes up with you when you think about sustainability and regeneration. Please take some time to reflect first before putting your answer in the chat. I see regreening popping up, and nature, innovation, circularity, wisdom of the elders, nice one, cycles, giving as much as you take out, lack of pollution, circularity, products that are less harmful. Yes. Living and running the world economy in a way that preserves the balance of people with nature. Ooh. Buying less stuff. Yeah, lots of angles to these topics. Balance, really nice one as well. Reconnecting us back to ourselves, each other, and the environment to enter a new consciousness, identity of our species, taking our place as a keystone species with the interdependent web of life. Minimalism and simplicity, great ideas lacking clear frame of reference. Nice. Thank you all for sharing. Lots of collective wisdom already in this group. The first time I encountered regeneration was the idea called regenerative economics, which is an idea made by John Fullerton, who founded the Capital Institute. And he was manager for 20 years on Wall Street. And he decided to walk away from that life based on his experience and gut feeling that something's wrong in the financial system and the financial world. And he went on a 15-year journey all the way back into economics history, as well as informing himself on a ton of different fields to come up with an idea of what is a truly healthy regenerative economic system. According to him, regeneration is the process that delivers sustainable living systems. So it's more like a continuous outcome. And his idea of a regenerative economy is based on 3 premises. The first one being the human economy is a living system, although today an unhealthy one. Secondly, there are universal patterns and principles that broadly describe the qualities and tendencies of how life works. And third, if the human economy is to be sustainable over the long run, it must harness the regenerative process by aligning with these principles of living systems. In the next picture, you will see the 8 principles. They are in right relationship, empowered participation, views wealth holistically, innovative, adaptive, responsive, seeks balance, as somebody already pointed out, edge effect abundance, honors community and place, and robust circulation. Now, economic history shows us that we've held on too long to models that don't really work. So these principles are intended to be a lodestar or a compass. And John only synthesized his findings to the extent that made sense for him. So the number 8, although beautifully imbalanced and continuous, is not fixed. And in fact, living up to the idea of empowered participation, everybody is invited to dive in, to familiarize, experience, and discuss. I am curious to know if there's any of these principles that appeal to you right away and why. Please take some time to reflect and share it in the chat. Svetoslav already commented. Reminds me of the principles in permaculture. Ramona commented also life's principles in biomimicry. Mark is curious whether this is a real economic model. I will get to that later. Some seem more obvious than others as natural universal principles. Helene is a fan of the empowered participation and honors community and place. I will continue with giving a bit more explanation to the principles now. So the first principle is that I would like to highlight is in-right relationship. It's about having the right structure throughout regional or global economies and society. You can think about, for instance, the golden ratio that you see in the snail's house, or the fractal structure of a lightning bolt. And in terms of robust circulation, you have concepts like flow and metabolism. Our blood flows to provide nutrients to our bodily system in the same way that money, power, and resources should circulate rather than accumulate throughout our economy and society. The idea of circular economy would also be in line with this principle. However, the way we are practically implementing it right now is far from what could be called truly circular. And for a critical assessment of the gap between theoretical and practical circular economy, I would advise to read an essay by Hans Stegeman. He's chief economist of Triodos Bank, and his essay is called Radical Circular Economy. The third one I would like to point out is seeks balance. It's not some kind of fixed balance. You should think about it like riding a unicycle, and there's some constant movement going on, but the system dynamics will keep the system upright and veer to some kind of balance back again. Now, these 3 principles are informed by fields such as ecological economics, and then you have to think about thinkers like Herman Daly and Robert Constanza, but also biology and biomimicry, as a beautiful example was given by Pablo last week. And the field of energy network science, which was totally new for me before this course. It's basically an umbrella term for several disciplines that study flows in networks and systems. And these flows can be anything like energy, nutrients, money. And the big discovery that this field has done is that the physical laws that govern health and development in ecosystems and living systems are common to all flow networks, which means that they equally apply to human networks such as economies and societies. And even more interesting is that this field can provide measures for systemic health. So we are basically getting more and more indicators of how our systems that we live in are doing. Next up is views wealth holistically. As already mentioned by Svetoslav, it's informed by permaculture. And permaculture is basically an aggregation of permanent and culture. So it entails way more than simply gardening with instead of against nature. And whereas our society is often focused on simply financial and material capital, there are way more forms of capital, such as spiritual, social, living, experiential and cultural. Taking all these forms of capital into account is important, equally so the way our behavior and the system dynamics affect them. If you go a few weeks back in time, you also experienced the offers and needs market that's developed by the Post-Growth Institute, which is also intended to make people think about these different forms of capital. The last principle I'd like to point out, contrary to is honoring community and place, and this is based on indigenous wisdom. Contrary to the homogenizing tendency of capitalism and McDonaldization of society, this principle draws upon indigenous wisdom, which is often valued in relation to land and community above everything else. And they do so because they celebrate diversity and foster distinctive potentiality. You can think of authors like Robin Wall Kimmerer or Tyson Yunkaporta. And in his book Sandtalk, Tyson expresses, if your story has no place, your law has no place, showing the importance of location and uniqueness. Also, with regard to the future, a lot of fingers point in the direction of empowering bioregional development as an important way of pursuing, instead of organizing us through nation states, which are like created by us. Now, when I look at the world through these regenerative spectacles, it is for me no wonder that we are facing existential threats. It's in big things like the growing gap of inequality, but also in small things such as how people deal with resources every day and taking for granted energy and fossil fuels. Even before this course, I used to like hitchhiking because of the adventure, meeting people, and of course it was a free mode of transport. But now I also view cars as a bundle of scarce resources, using fossil fuels at a way faster rate that they can regenerate. So for me, it only makes sense to make use of the flow that is already in the system. Towards regenerative cultures, there's a famous model by Bill Reed and Daniel Christian Wall, who both can be considered thought leaders on regeneration. And their model can be viewed as a roadmap, giving us an idea where we are, where we need to go, and what changes are required. And I will give you a quick run through. On the y-axis, we go from degenerative systems all the way to regenerative systems. So degenerative systems are characterized by decreasing system vitality, and in regenerative systems, it increases. And on the x-axis, we go from an exploitative approach, which therefore needs an increase in energy use, to a regenerative approach, which enables this self-feeding mechanism of regenerative systems. And as a result, it has a decreasing energy use. So we basically need to make this shift from the bottom left to the top right. And there are the following stages along this journey. So the conventional practice, which basically means that damage to ecosystems and societies is only limited by regulatory bodies and the moral compass of, unfortunately, too few people. And this step is also referred to as one step better than breaking the law. Next up is green. It are basically relative improvements compared to conventional practice. So we do a little bit more than is regulatory required. Often companies do one thing and they market it as if they are saving the world. And because they do one thing, they track it and all the attention goes there. If you take into account the whole system, they might even do more pollution or more harm to ecosystems. So this is where the term greenwashing also comes from. Then we have sustainable. It's the neutral point of not doing any more damage. But since we've done a lot of damage since the Industrial Revolution, we simply cannot stop here, and definitely not if we want to sustain a human population of 10 billion people by 2050. And one could also ask, do we really want to sustain the status quo? Now, the whole area below the x-axis is characterized by creating conditions that break down life, taking a fragmented approach to design and innovation, and competition that creates scarcity. And now we move above that line. Restorative. It's a phase characterized by actions intended to restore damaged ecosystem. However, we still keep doing this with the mindset of humans as masters and manipulators of nature. As there's a saying in the Bible, make the earth your subordinate. And during the scientific revolution, things were emphasized to explore all the secrets that Mother Nature had to offer. As a result of these actions not being truly systemic or integrative, the results will most likely be short-lived or have unexpected negative side effects. And as system thinkers say, when you experience side effects, you're basically thinking too small. Also, a potential example that you might know is what happened to Alan Savory. He is famous for regenerative agriculture. And during his lifetime, he was working in Africa and came to the conclusion that elephants were causing harm to the ecosystem. So they ordered killing 70,000 elephants. And after that, the problem that they tried to fix only got worse. So they ended up wrong. As a result of that, it shows that whatever good intentions we have, we need to be careful of the side effects it can have. Whose quote is that of the side effects and things? It's from System Thinkers, Helene. I think it's from Donella Meadows. The next step is reconciliatory. It's characterized by us taking the switch from masters and manipulators of nature to understanding our place in life's evolutionary journey and us being participants in life-sustaining processes. So we begin by moving culture back into nature. And our last stage is regenerative. We further adapt our way of participation and design to the life-sustaining processes to create win-win-win solutions for all life. This requires weaving multi-stakeholder connections, having dialogues and/or reconcile different perspectives at a higher systemic level. And for example, we need to work with disruptions instead of trying to avoid them. So an idea there is that in the Netherlands, we have dikes created to keep the water out, but in the future, there will become a point that we have to allow the water to come in because we simply cannot stop it anymore. So the question is, are we able to adapt before this happens? To recap a little, the whole area above the x-axis, the horizontal line, is characterized by taking a living systems approach that guides design and innovation, collaboration, creating abundance, as compared to competition, creating scarcity, and as humans creating the conditions conducive to life. Now, you'll probably know that the terms as green, sustainable, natural, circular, they have already been co-opted by business. So it's bound to happen to the other terms as well. So whenever you see an organization claiming to be one of the things like restorative or reconciliatory, you can start some kind of discussion to understand what do you mean by it and how do you practice what you preach.
Alex,
yes.
This is fantastic. Thank you. This is a really excellent introduction to a subject I didn't know really anything about. I'm struggling just a little bit with some of the higher order concepts, you know, the reconciliatory and regenerative, and that's probably because of the paradigm I'm stuck in, right? Up in the stack up to restorative, I kind of think how one transcends the one below it, but then when it gets beyond that, it really does bump up against my mental models, and I'm struggling to sort of think of examples about what would replace the sort of transactional and exploitative approaches to conducting relations between human and nature that would sort of usefully fit a reconciliatory paradigm, for example. Can you, without trying to break your time structure too much, can you give us a couple of examples?
Yeah, I think it's to what pops to mind. Of course, I don't have all the answers, but what I get from all the things that I've read and discussed with people is it's about increasing our knowledge of systems and taking a more humble approach, and not taking more than you need. Things like that. That's the kind of things that pop into my mind, but maybe somebody else has an idea as well to add on to it.
I was introduced at Surrey to the concept of usufruct. Have you ever come across this one? It's a Latin term that means you have the right to take the fruit, but to do no damage to the tree, and presumably beyond that, you know, some sort of moral obligation to fertilize the tree or plant more trees or share the fruit. But there's something that actually dates back to medieval times, I think, around, and it's from, I think, commons thinking, around sort of you know, shared natural resources, and the sort of the separation of the fruit from the health and vitality of the system that provides it. So that's my closest idea to sort of weigh into that level. Yeah.
Thanks for adding it. It definitely touches upon it, or is in line with that. Yeah, thank you.
I was just wondering what it would look like if we would live that way. And then I think I once read that even the Aztecs or other indigenous tribes in Latin America, that they were already exploiting their environment. And well, it was just that I didn't have the means to make it that big, that they didn't kill everything. But apparently even then, when did they live? A long time ago, they were already breaking down their environments and taking more than could be restored. Do you know? And so I was wondering if it's just part of the human condition and that we are doomed.
Well, of course, it could be that we are but simply too much. But on the other hand, a lot of the authors or thought leaders are pointing in the direction of combining our scientific knowledge with indigenous wisdom. So if we are doing this in the right degree, then we might have the ability to live in harmony with the nature. So we use best of both worlds. This keeps popping up on my journey. So the Aztecs might not have had the scientific knowledge that we had, and we now have forgotten the indigenous wisdom that we need to tap into again. So maybe
but they had that wisdom, and apparently they were already destroying. So is it true that then, if you take indigenous wisdom, that everything will be all right? I mean, apparently they did not do a good job on that. Well, maybe we need more information about it. But I was just thinking that maybe it has always been like that.
Yeah, I understand your point. Keep me posted on your journey, Helene.
Yeah, I will.
Go ahead, Ramona.
It's actually not a question, but just a little reflection on the topic that we just had back. All right, so that's why I really like the concept of the keystone species, because even a beaver also takes away from some species and then provides more habitat for others by building a dam and really altering the flow of water. And when you hear research like that, then it's always like, how far did they look, right? So maybe some species died, but then did other things emerge from that and flourish from that? And I think it's going to be really, really difficult for us to reach a point of awareness where really we know the after effects of our actions and the triple down effects, maybe 10, 12 steps after we took the action, to really know whether it was regenerative or not. But there's also this quote from Albert Einstein that we can't solve our problems with the same level of thinking that has created them. And so for me, it's a bit more about like living the question and just having that intention to actually orient towards that. And then eventually we all know that it's going to be better at least than what we're doing right now in terms of exploitation. And if we can completely flip it around, I think that's having to evolve like over time. And it might just be that we are not able to see and think it right now from our current awareness.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, that highly resonates with me. Thank you. Ricardo, go ahead.
Yes, I just had a very quick comment on Jeremy's use of this word usufruct, because I think it's still very human-centered, because, for example, just taking the same example of the tree, if you still take the fruit and not damage the tree, and also you share it, you're not taking into consideration that also other animals needs that type, like the insects need the fruit, and birds, and then this kind of fruit is within a circle and an ecology. So I think that's where the system, that's what you were, I think, Alex, kind of highlighting, that we need to start thinking as a system, and that is where regenerative thinking is very revolutionary, because also of the connection with the non-humans species. That's it.
Thank you for putting your 2 cents in. Svetoslav, go ahead.
Yeah, just a very quick comment from my side. Yeah, I think that we are really new species on the planet. And if we look at how other species evolved and they adapted to the environment of the planet, we can learn a lot of them. So the thing is that we have we didn't have so much time to evolve and to live in perfect harmony with the natural world. And I think that we're going right now in some kind of a transition when we are learning and we are trying to figure out how to live in harmony with the natural world around us. This is either going to go like in the destruction of our civilization, or it is going to go in more harmonized, balanced way to live. Yeah, basically, this is my comment. And about the regenerative cultures and all of that, everything is perfect, like on theory. But I have always wondered how to do it on practice and how to measure the effect. If we are actually sustainable, if we are green, we are regenerative in our daily life. And I think that we need to start from a small scale and then to go big because in a small system we can measure everything much more clearly. Everything is clear. And yeah, basically that's my comment. I'm still struggling to figure out what all of this concept means. Even I have spent something like 4 or 5 years already studying them.
Thank you for sharing your insights, Svetoslav. I think for touching upon this is the ideas of ego, eco, seva. Seva being the Sanskrit for serving. I will put these in the chat. People Google it, you might come across some articles to know more about these different mindsets and the mindset shift that people might have to better understand regenerative thinking. Let's continue with a few examples of organizations. So recently, Patagonia, one of the front runners in finding out how they can be sustainable, even they had to acknowledge that they are unsustainable and part of the problem. So if you take into account the ladder we just saw, and they say we are unsustainable, which puts them at the place of the green level, let's say, it only shows how much work there is to be done for all the other parties that can make up our global economy. But there are also promising examples. One of them is Wilderland. This is a Dutch company that makes tea from indigenous weeds that increase the biodiversity. And they are building a regenerative community around it, which they call the rabbit hole, with the idea that once you've gone through the rabbit hole, you look at the world differently. And they wish to spread their learnings, but also their business model as far as wide as possible. And there's an interesting video about this organization, how they built their regenerative brand. And the link is also included in the slide deck. Next up, here's a framework that shows how the regenerative paradigm basically distinguishes itself from the sustainable and degenerative paradigm. I'm not saying it's like we need to shift from one to the other, or we need to throw away everything else that was before, because there's also lots of debates going on, but there are a few points that I'd like to highlight. For instance, think about what it would mean if we are not completely competitive focused in the global economy, but more realizing that there's interdependence and that we use competitiveness to the extent that makes sense. Also, you have the switch from centralized to decentralized. This touches upon the point that Svetoslav was making. You cannot really make, I think, a regenerative economy or society that's completely organized top down, because you need the voices of the people, you need the uniqueness of everybody on the ground from the beginning, else you cannot make anything that's inclusive. I'm an organization scientist by trade, so I have to highlight this one: organizing ourselves as a machine as compared to organizing us as a living system, as Pablo highlighted last week in a beautiful example. But another company I would like to mention is Rhythm. Their name and link to their website is in the chat, but I will quickly write it for you. Rhythm, they are a beautiful example of helping organizations to turn into living systems. And you also have a switch from reductionist thinking to holistic thinking. This was basically this is hard to grasp still. I think it's very hard to grasp for us as a species, but it's necessary to do so. And it took me a couple of weeks in the course to get a basic understanding of this idea, but definitely worth to learn how to think holistically and more as a system. I see there's a question. Let me see. Svetoslav, do you think that capitalism would have to be destroyed in our way to regeneration? Personally, I'm not. I think at the moment we're not really experiencing capitalism as it was, but there are regenerative thinkers that say that it has to go. For instance, Jeremy Lent is one. But I think if you would go back to capitalism, but restrict it to on some areas where it would lose itself, I think it might still work. Also, the thought leader John Fullerton, he's not fully against capitalism, because there are great aspects of capitalism, as in the diversity that it celebrates of people going on entrepreneurial journeys, etc. So the field is diverse on it as well. Here's a business model canvas, a bit of an upgraded version that's, I think, a bit more future-proof. It's the Flourishing Business Canvas, made by a man called Anthony Upward. And what I would like to point out here is that it basically acknowledges the embedded nature of the organization in the society and environment. So it learns an organization to think about the biophysical stocks, like key resources and living and non-living biophysical material that it depends upon for its activities. And another, in a similar way, makes organization aware of the ecosystem services, such as clean water, fresh air, and vibrant soil that it depends upon. It's all things that we've taken for granted, but since things are degenerating and things are decaying, in the future, we might not even be able to take them for granted. So it's good to make people aware of it. And another shift is the not focusing on a single product or service for one group of customers or a whole couple of groups of customers, but taking a more holistic view of creation of value in a co-creative way for all sorts of stakeholders. And thereby also acknowledging that whatever we do might have co-destructing effects for other stakeholders that we touch upon. Now, while I was preparing this presentation, I started to wonder how this canvas would go together with the model that Pablo presented last week, because it adds a natural time layer to this holistic model as well. So if anyone goes to try this, please let me know and keep me informed. And then last but not least, this shift towards regeneration is about letting go of our tendency to control, trying to think in quick fixes and having all the answers. At the beginning of my journey, I heard the words, embrace the questions now, and you might be living them later. That resonated with me, and it has helped me throughout my journey so far. So I kindly pass these words on to you. Hopefully, some of the things that I've shared today will enrich your post-growth entrepreneurial endeavors. I wish you all lots of luck, and don't forget to enjoy the ride. Thank you.